So I'm not sure when I last recorded a video, but what was SimCline became London1940.org. So obviously SimCline had a World War II component to it. London 1940 is just about creating London in 1940 in a simulation sense, and it cuts down the number of maps. So for folks wondering what's been going on the past few weeks, months, whatever, um, the new code can be found in MapBlend. In fact, it should say just committed today, hopefully. Yep. So it's in London map. I mean the output directory if you run it. And it takes the information from existing four, let's see if I can do this, yep, the four maps. So let me see, where are they? Yep, I think these two and these two represent London. So here are the maps currently. Well, actually, it's a representation of them, but here's the bottom one. You can see London's basically the blob, which moves through like this London, and then this is London, and then this is London. So these maps are actually quite interesting. And if you zoom in, I established a grid, which I think is maybe 40 by 50, and the colors aren't quite the same. So these maps look pretty similar. The two maps, I think 6171, have the same color, and I have histograms to do the color analysis. And these two have their own color, which I have histograms to do the analysis on, and that's all in London map. But before I do the histograms and get the colors right and get these four tiles, the aim is to have four PNG files that neatly fit together. There is an issue that the maps are slightly rotated. So if you look here, you see these lines. Eventually these lines are supposed to overlap. So because they're not cut here perfectly at the bottom, I left a bit of stuff at the bottom. If we get to the bottom, there we go. These maps need to be rotated slightly. Now this one is actually pretty good. So map 60, as I think we're looking at currently, is actually pretty good. So the aim will be just to get to here in the cut and then take the maps like that and then run them through Bob Mottram's map2 JSON utility and see after the rotation if they're still good maps. Now these are slightly shrunken PNGs. Oh, don't you love the interface? Okay, so some of these, however, are still quite a bit off. So if you look here at the gaps, here, up here specifically, and you follow it down, you can, if you follow it down right, you can see that the map is slightly rotated, which is very difficult. So this is getting slightly bigger here because these lines are accurate and these lines are not so accurate. 61's pretty good too. But the aim is to get these things exactly straight in terms of the maps to the actual file. And then hopefully see if we can glue the four together on their edges. So get them exactly straight and then glue them together on the edges. Some of the maps are more off than others, but they're pretty good, basically. And what the current software does is it includes a rotate and a slight, it's kind of a blur action. So I'm going to show this now. So these are the four maps, and they need to be rotated slightly so we can get all the maps, the four maps to line up, hopefully in the inner seams of the map, this part and this part ideally. For all, sorry, it'll be this, it's actually the bottom part of the seam rather. So this section and this section will hopefully get close to lining up. Now, there's probably going to be a couple more steps than necessary for this, but this is just where we are currently. So here, please, make your eyes out of focus. So what I'm doing here is there's actually two levels here. There's a heavier level and a lighter level, as you can see. And the aim is just to recenter the map so it's on this line. So obviously there's going to be some pluses and minuses. These numbers are still being, worked on. But each four of these maps need to be specially rotated so that, this stuff lines up. So obviously there's a lot of stuff to go, but it's just a matter of committing the software in GitLab, which is where it is currently, and just getting the maps to line up and then to make the cuts and then to have four PNG files which do fit together. I might actually make it into 16 PNG files, 4x4, 16. because the color matching is going to be particularly interesting once the maps are actually straight. So this is the work in progress associated with London 1940. I've also written a bunch of code associated with occupations. Can we test me? Can we test me? Do I have the occupation? So the main aim initially was to get, here we go, Mythical London 1940. So the main aim was to get professions down, but also get a situation where the thing could simulate 8.5 million entities, 8.5 million people, Londoners, Londonium. So that has been a large part of it initially, is just to get the people down pat, and then to, I think this one of these has the occupations as well, I seem to recall. It's been a while, unfortunately, because I'm working on maps currently. But I think probably slowly but surely, this is probably way too boring. Are we starting getting professions? No. These are just the most basic, simple entities, and to see how that is running specifically. So it's to use the existing SDK, the command line interface in particular, because I think the command line is really very powerful for this kind of simulation. So it enables you to interrogate individual entities, run the simulation, gather data, that kind of stuff, which was already written through the ape SDK for simulated ape, as it's known now. So all these things have been there historically. It's just been a matter of rewriting it, and obviously I have both a command line and a Mac version currently. Getting the Windows version, we'll get the Windows version eventually. But, just to get the basics done through command line so it's verifiable and through maps. So I think I've introduced both Londonium and just getting map blend back to what it was originally, which was a map blending package. And then Urban will obviously take the 4 London maps, as will, where is it, Map Out, which does map to JSON, and it'll take the JSON output. And then I think in Map Out or in Urban, there is the, here are the occupations. Just when you were looking for occupations. Okay. So we're at, I think, 50 currently. The aim is to get to 400 occupations. So here we have just a few of the occupations. So yeah, I think it's at 50, could be 50, yeah, it's at 50. 50 something, 50 and change. So the aim is to get detailed in here and have, dockmasters and dish throwers and doormen and drapers and drafts. Unfortunately, I'm using the 1940 vernacular, so please hit me up if you want me to make this 2022 compatible. But actually, this is relatively important because obviously there are certain professions for certain genders, and the ideally I would have used the telephone directory from 1940, but unfortunately British Telecom or the British Telecom Archive will not. I mean, I can find the documents in the wild, I can purchase them, OCR them, and then analyze them. But I think it's probably more interesting to have the city map in place, and then you can do distributions associated with occupations. So that's what I'm going to be doing, just to keep myself on my toes. But obviously the first thing is just to get the maps right. Like, I'm very pernickety about, you got to get certain things done and you get other things done, and it all kind of comes together. Shout outs to Bob Mottram, because everything he's done leading up to this point, he's now working on, I think, probably the best described as an open source social media client similar to Twitter in part, and obviously it's a very needed project. So I was really lucky to have Bob for the period of time that I had him, and I was really lucky to have his code. I've warned him I'm going to be pretty brutal with it with regards to map to JSON. But that's the update. I don't know if it's the monthly update, but it's the current update associated with London1940.org. Thank you very much for tuning into this, and my hope is I'll have London rotated and square and the colours right, and then maybe some PNG files to go back into, if folks remember, I think it's in Urban. I'm pretty sure it's in Urban. Yes, that's what I was trying to do in Urban, I seem to recall. But yeah, the map edit is where it all comes together, and where actually, you start playing with the vectors and the JSON and getting them all to look nice and fine. And believe me, the phone directory, I think, was 1,600 pages worth of data. which would have had to have been crunched to get the professions and the locations. And obviously, there's a postcode directory as well. Not a postcode directory, but there's a postcode lookup to map the postcodes onto these various bits of London, which thankfully we don't have to do with this aspect of the simulation. I was kind of feeling that it might be a good way to do it, but yeah, we're just going to treat it as a raw simulation with London as the underlying, unless maybe the British Telecom Archives decide to change their mind, or one of the private enterprises that owns the information semi-publicly. But for now, I'm just happy to be getting my maps aligned and getting my JSON output. So Tom Barbalet in Las Vegas, Nevada, signing out.